So what do we hope to cover in the next, we have an hour and 25 minutes left, right? So I would like to just highlight the folks that are part of this work as it relates to AUW California and the DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. We love our acronyms, but let me say that because those words are important and powerful to the work that we do, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we'll talk about the membership of the California Committee. We'll talk about our charge and goals for the year for 2022-2023. We want to promote the national trainings that are being developed right now and will occur. I think we've got the next one coming up soon. And we want to make sure that you know how to access the diversity, equity, and inclusion resources, whether they be on the AUW California page, Nationals page. There's so much good information out there, and we want to do a better job at making sure that there's e-communications, whether that be through board to board or other opportunities to highlight resources. They may be embedded in AEW or perhaps they're provided by some of our community partners where we can advance our learning and understanding. We will have a facilitated Q&A with Julia and Melissa, and we have some questions designed that we hope that they'll be able to speak to, and other things will probably emerge as well from your questions and comments. And so, as Linda shared, we want you to be able to feel comfortable to use the Q&A feature. Know that you'll probably have your questions sitting there for a minute. At any point you want to put it there, and we'll likely answer them live after we, or we'll answer as many as we can in this space that we can speak to after we go through the facilitated Q&A. And then also Melissa has some slides and information she'd like to share from the national perspective of work that's being done by the Inclusion and Equity Committee. We want to provide a little bit of space for membership kudos. So we will allow, there's going to be an opportunity that I'll speak to for members who are attendees who would like to speak to the good work that you're doing within your branches, to lift that work up, elevate that work, and perhaps inspire us to do work in our branches or at the state level. So there, just know that that opportunity is available for you to speak to some recent programming, or maybe there was an article that you published, an event. It really is quite open into what you can share about, as long as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then we'll close this out because there's an opportunity for you to be able to provide feedback. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is our 2022-2023 AAUW California DEI Committee. And I just want to thank all of the folks that are committing to not only doing work within your branch and your community, but also signed up to do this work for AAUW California. Many of the people listed here, I believe, also were on the committee last year, which was a foundational year for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee with AAUW California. And many of them will take roles on getting their peer groups together. So if you're a DEI chair coordinator, it might be that Barbara and Lenore are facilitating spaces for us to talk about DEI. Patrice, Kathy, Charmin will play a role, and our resources in making sure that they're accessible and readily available for you to continue your learning outside of these spaces. And then we also have folks like Deborah who and Elaine. Deborah will play a role in really engaging branch presidents. Some of you all don't have DEI chairs or coordinators perhaps, but that doesn't mean that this work lies within a respective role. It really is all of our responsibilities, and definitely our branch presidents play a huge role in really modeling the way. And Elaine will continue to play a role as last year in engaging the IBCs, the Interbranch Council. Next slide. So if you attended the town hall that we had, I'm feeling like time is just flying by. I believe that was back in September. You'll probably remember this from what I spotlighted as part of our DEI committee work. We really want to provide mentorship, support, and conversations like today, this community conversation around issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We want these spaces to be brave. There's no judgment. This is an opportunity to learn and to hold ourselves accountable, to hold others accountable in developing our understanding around diversity, equity, and inclusion, expanding beyond what we know. So it's learning, and there's some unlearning as well. Let's just name that as well. And we want to develop and share resources. You may have resources that we're unaware of, but that's part of the collective, part of community, making sure that we're really leveraging each other's understanding and knowledge and supporting each other to really develop as AAUW in the state and within our branches. Next slide. Okay, so I won't spend too much time on what to expect, but you'll expect more of these statewide chats, right? We want to have quarterly conversations with our DEI officers and coordinators to offer that mentorship and support. If you need one-on-one support, there's something very specific and unique based on your needs or your branch's needs, reach out to us and we'll provide our contact information at the end. But we want to be able to speak to any questions, concerns, comments you may have as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So know that support exists. And then outreach and that participation that I was referencing earlier as part of our AUW California DEI Committee rules and work. Next slide. Or actually, you know what, right there, I think that's where we're gonna stop sharing the slides. And now what I'd like to do is, I feel like I talked a lot and I'm gonna talk a little bit more before we go into the facilitated Q&A, but I'd like to introduce our panelists, Melissa and Julia. So I'll start by introducing Julia Brown. And Miss Julia Brown is our National Board Chair of AAUW. Julia Brown is a law-educated and results-driven professional with extensive experience in executive management, financial management, nonprofit formation and governance, as well as compliance enforcement. She is a graduate of Oklahoma State University and the University of Oklahoma College of Law, where she was law class president. She has worked at all levels of government in Oklahoma, Washington, D.C., California, and New Mexico, in corporate America, and has served in the U.S. Army. Julia has served both as Assistant District Attorney and Assistant State Attorney General. A former county and city manager, Julia is currently regional rep for the New Mexico State Economic Development Department. And in this role, she is responsible for outreach and assistance to existing businesses, those interested in relocating to New Mexico, as well as entrepreneurs interested in forming businesses in 7 counties in the south central and southwestern part of the state. Julia is the recipient of numerous awards and honors, including Distinguished Alumni Award, College of Arts and Sciences, OSU, and a Woman of Achievement Award from Legal Momentum, the Women's Legal Defense and Education Fund. In 2016, she was presented a Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award for volunteer and community service. Julia is a life member of AAUW, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, and the NAACP. She also serves on the regional board of Girl Scouts of the Desert Southwest. Welcome, Julia. Thank you for being with us. And Dr. LeDuc, Melissa LeDuc, is the chair for Inclusion and Equity for the American Association of University Women. Melissa LeDuc earned her PhD in Curriculum and Instruction from Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas. Prior to that, Dr. LeDuc completed her bachelor's degree in chemistry from Hawaii Pacific University, Honolulu, Hawaii, and master's degree in chemistry from University of Dayton, Ohio. She currently serves as faculty member at National Intelligence University in Maryland, and she has been in the U.S. Air Force since 2005 and held instructor and faculty positions within the U.S. Air Force Academy, U.S. Air Force Reserve Officer Training Corps, Global School for Professional Military Education, and Squadron Officer School. In addition, she has spoken at numerous national and international conferences. Her research interests include adult education, teacher education, and online education. Dr. LeDuc is a member of the Literary Research Association, Association for the Study of Higher Education, and International Society for the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. We are thrilled to have Dr. Melissa LeDuc with us as well. So with that, if it's okay with you both, I'm just going to pause for a minute. And before we dive into the questions that you've received, I just want to know if there's anything else that you have robust backgrounds and bring so much to this space and other spaces. Is there anything that you would just like to, just on a personal note or a professional note, that you want to speak to that you think would be important for our attendees today to know that may not be reflected in that background or bio?
So I am so excited to talk with all of you and to reach out and talk with people in states. I am in the grand scheme of things fairly new to AAUW. So I love learning from all of you and your experiences. I also am a national member only. And that's a lot of because I move quite a bit in the Air Force, right? So it's hard to put roots down somewhere. So I love hearing your perspectives of what is working well and what's not working so much. And we'll go into a little bit more of that when later in the program for our national goals. But thanks so much, Stormy, and your team for having us here, and Julia for extending the invite to me. Really, really excited to learn from all of you tonight.
Thank you. Again, we really appreciate you being here.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm excited to be joining you as well. California is always on the cutting edge or the leading edge of doing innovative things. And I'm thrilled that you all are conducting this chat to talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity. It is an issue that a number of branches and state affiliates are rightfully concerned about. And I think it's a great start for us to talk about the broad array of resources and tools that are available on the website, as well as the training that is underway for diversity officers and the other information and resources that the Equity and Inclusion Committee are bringing to the table for the benefit of all of us. So I look forward to discussing the questions, both those that Stormy posed to us in advance and the questions that are coming from the participants live.
And Julia, we have a few comments just asking if there's a way that you could increase your volume. I think some people are having some difficulty hearing.
Okay, is this better?
Try, can you speak again?
Is this better?
Maybe a little bit louder.
Well, I'm at 100% on my volume, so I hope you can hear me now.
Okay, hopefully that works. Let's see if there's, okay. Okay, it looks like, so if Julia's at 100%, this may, this might be as loud as the volume is going to get. So we're gonna proceed, okay? Okay, so thank you for adding a bit more context, and just, again, we're so glad to have you here. And so with that, because I want to make sure we have enough time to get through the questions and enough time to talk about the good work that's being done, and please do, everyone who's here, continue to put your questions in the Q&A. We may not answer it right this second, but we've created space to be able to do that. So with that, I'll lead with the first question. And just know, Melissa, Julia, I am, it's whoever feels comfortable speaking to the question first, or if you feel like this is one you want to hold off on and just let the other take the lead, that's perfectly fine. But the first question is, and these were formed by our California DEI committee, and we were curious to know, how do we address a lack of engagement or interest in issues of DEI?
So we get this question a lot at the National Committee, and one thing that I think keeps coming up, right? We're so passionate about it, and that's why we're here, and that's why we're serving in these roles. But it's almost like force feeding, right? And at a certain point in time, people just get tired of hearing the terms, unfortunately. They may agree with everything that you're saying, but they're just tired of the preacher-like method, right? So what we like to say, a couple things, right? One, DEI is about empathy. We really just want to show empathy to others, right? Now we're doing it in terms of trying to engage and help others relate in terms of all the dimensions of diversity, right? And all the intersectionality, the individual things that make us us, right? So let's practice empathy in seeing where each other are, right? And then the other thing that kind of like to say is, if people get tired of the terminology, maybe don't use the terminology. And that seems, counterintuitive, but if we get the message across, right, in a way that people understand and can digest, then it doesn't necessarily matter that we're using that term right now, right? We can use that term that maybe doesn't feel as loaded later. So those are a couple things that we like to say at first, just to get the conversation going, right? To open the door. Julia, what did I miss? A lot, I know.
Well, I don't know that you missed anything, Melissa. I think I probably like to start with talking about the mission of AAUW. As we think about leveling the playing field for women and girls, as we think about equity for all, which is our vision, then it's difficult, I think, to achieve that mission and that vision if, as an organization, we don't seek to be more inclusive and more welcoming. There are certainly, and it's not just a matter of race or age or gender. There are so many other factors and so many other things that distinguish all of us from people who are not identical to us. And what a boring world it would be if we were all cut from the same cloth and looked and talked and sounded and had the same background. I think it would be a little dull and a little boring. There are so many interesting cultural things to learn about other people, as well as people who are differently able and people who have a different identity than the rest of us. And picking up on what Melissa was saying in terms of being empathetic and learning a bit about what it means to be different from the person that you see in the mirror and what you can learn from that, how that will help you grow as an individual and then how collectively it can help us grow as an organization.
Thank you both. I really appreciate some of the things that all of what you said, and some of the things that resonated with me the most is, Melissa, you starting off with empathy and that empathic approach to the way in which we engage with one another on a human level. I think that's so important. Julia, when you talked about the mission, for me, when folks are asking us, like, how do I connect this to the work of AAUW? I believe it's our mission, right? It's embedded, and we all are affiliated with AAUW, or most of us are. But I think it's worth saying, let's name what our mission is: to advance gender equity for women and girls through research, education, and advocacy. And when we talk about gender equity, and we talk about advancing gender equity for women and girls, I have to think about we are multiple identities. And when Melissa spoke to intersectionality, I oftentimes think about my own identity, which very much so is rooted in, and I should say this, my pronouns are she, her. I identify as being a woman, but I identify as being a Black woman. I identify as being a Black woman and a mother. And those intersectional identities really are aspects of who I am. And to not see me as more than just a woman, to not recognize my race and what that means for me and how I move about this world, I think is a real missed opportunity, right? So that's why there's some responsibility there for us to think about all of the identities that we hold as individuals, as a collective, and think about how that really supports just even the nature and way in which we work through AAUW. So we'll talk more about the accountability piece, but I think that's the stretching and thinking that we need to really elevate our work and to really hold these aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion really central to the nature of carrying out AAUW's mission. So thank you for all of that, because those are some things that just really speaking to me. So the next question is, how do we address the lack of diversity within our membership? And that was, that's something that, I've heard circulate in various spaces. It definitely comes up as part of our DEI committee. And I've heard it in branch meetings and elsewhere over the years. And I think it's an important question to ask and to think about. And I don't know that we're going to have all of the answers, but I put that to you all to see what you have to say about it.
I think the question of what do we say about it is a good question, and there's no model answer or silver bullet in terms of the answer. I think a lot of it has to do with the branches and the state affiliates in terms of what they are interested in doing, what they are willing to do, and what they are actually doing in terms of putting together a plan for outreach to diversify themselves. We have a number of branches that are quite literally dying out for lack of bringing in new members. And I've talked to countless members over the years who have said things like, well, we'd like to diversify and we would like to bring new members in, but we don't know where to find them, or we don't know how to do it. And I would say the first stop would be to take a look at the toolkit and the resources that are online, because there is a wealth of information in them. And to speak colloquially, it actually is not rocket science. If you think about the other women's organizations that are just in the community where your branch is located, as an example. Look to see what their missions are, see what commonalities exist between your branch and its programs and what it's seeking to do, and what other women's groups are doing. Look for opportunities to invite them to something that you are doing, and look for opportunities to go to some events that they are doing, so that you begin to get a feel for one another and find those points of commonality. I've been to branches who have had dynamic events with excellent speakers and panelists. And at the end of the event, nobody in the branch reached out to any of those women they invited to be on the panel who were not AAUW members to ask them if they'd be interested in attending a meeting or if they'd be interested in joining. And so sometimes it's just a matter of not making the ask.
So thanks for the toolkit plug. The toolkit does have a lot of resources for this. And I'm also going to make a plug for the diversity officer training that we're doing this Saturday, because we do have a session that talks about that collaboration with other groups and other teams that have the same mission sets as us, right? Why do we try to reinvent the wheel when there are other folks out there and we can collaborate and then use that strength together and diversify our membership, right? And Julia said this and definitely reinforced it. We have to go to places that we don't normally go, right? If we want people that don't look like us, that don't think like us, then we have to go to places we wouldn't go. Go to places they go, right? Reach out to them. And then when we do make contact with people that aren't necessarily in AAUW or know about AAUW, or even conversely have heard about it but haven't necessarily heard great things, right? We are the welcoming committee. We are the embodiment of what AAUW is. So if we're not warm and friendly and driven, right, then why should they be a part of the organization? So be a beacon for the mission and for your team wherever you go. We heard in the last diversity officer training, there was, I think it was in Virginia, but don't quote me on that. But one team did a great job of bringing new members in to like a luncheon, just to welcome people and show new folks what AAUW is all about. Fatal flaw in the luncheon, round tables, everyone was sitting with people they already knew. So there was one person who came who didn't know anyone, sat at a table, no one engaged her, and she never came back, right? So those little things that we don't necessarily think about, like, oh, we're at lunch with our friends. But if you have a new friend at the table, right, make sure that's a new friend at the table, and bring them in. And then in terms of, I know we get the question a lot about younger membership. There are some great programs out there, like Arizona has a great outreach for colleges. And I'm sure that we can hook you all up for anyone that's interested with their state president. Anna is on the National I&E Committee as well. So we get her expertise in terms of doing college collaborative programs. And a lot of that is you know, job and career and just how do you be a female professional, right? And it's under this AAUW umbrella. So it's dual purpose, right? It's helping that community and putting out our good name. So those are some ideas that hopefully reinforce things that you're already doing, because you already do great work. It's just taking that great work into places that people wouldn't typically see it.
Thank you. I love that. It's just ways that we can be inclusive and welcoming, particularly when we notice someone who's at an event or meeting or in our space that may not typically be there at every meeting, but it's an opportunity to be warm and engaging and supportive of them being in the space and connecting them with other members. I also love the piece around collaborating and thinking about organizations where there's alignment in missions, and there's lots of organizations that are connected to our mission and have similarities in our communities. And so how are we outreaching? How are we engaging? How are we not just inviting them into our spaces, but also being, I use the word and it's a little intense, intrusive in terms of the way that we outreach and engage with our communities. And, you know, I think when we share the good work that we're doing and we share our mission, it really is going to resonate with many other organizations that we're already not partnering with. So thank you for that. The next question is, what are subtle acts of inclusion we can personally take to support a more inviting, inclusive, and welcoming space? Melissa, you already were touching on this in that example that you provided, but Julia, you as well, in terms of, you know, the way that we collaborate. And so I think those are elements that really speak to this question. But are there other ways, even in the ways that we engage with one another, and that maybe, you know, in terms of backgrounds and perspectives different from us, but subtle acts of inclusion that we can take within our membership, outside of our membership, that are going to support that inclusive space.
So
the board and the national staff have been engaged in some education or some learning, if you will, to broaden our understanding of JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and DEI, as we have been using the term, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it has included such things as reading books on diversity and inclusion. We have looked at some videos and some short films that have been illuminating, eye-opening, and educational. And we have also retained the services of a consulting firm that has already conducted a couple of trainings for the staff and one for the board, and we'll have another one coming up in the not too distant future. And we're making the information about the reading lists, about the films and the videos and the like available on the website, so that the branch and state affiliates have an opportunity to check some of those things out. One of the branches that I belong to here in Las Cruces, New Mexico, has started a similar program. And a number of branch members, I think probably the biggest number for any of them that we've had has been about 35 members participating. And some of the discussions have been really very good. I think the first time that you do it, some people will feel uncomfortable. They will be concerned about whether or not discussions are offensive to other people who are participating. And it's important to talk about those things and to get them out there so that we don't make assumptions about what someone else is hearing when we speak. And we don't make assumptions about how they are interpreting what we are saying, or that we are trying to interpret what they are thinking. If we get to the point where we can be open and forthcoming and honest about things, then that quickly dispels that fear of not being understood, or fear of offending someone, or misunderstanding what someone else is saying, because we've put it on the table, and everybody feels better as a result of having done that. I want to jump to one of the questions that I saw in the Q&A, and then I'll turn it over to Melissa to respond to your question, Stormy. And that question was, what has prompted the emphasis for DEI within AAUW? And I would again say, looking at our mission, and looking certainly at the great distance the organization has traveled in 141 years. But in thinking about a quote from Robert Frost, I would say, notwithstanding all that AAUW has done, which is phenomenal, we still have miles to go before we sleep. And there is yet work to be done to level that playing field, and to truly be an open, welcoming, inclusive, and diverse organization that is fighting to empower women to be all that they can be, all they deserve to be, and all that they have the right to be.
So it's hard to follow that. So I like, she's very, strategic in her thinking and her guidance, and it's amazing. And I like to think a little bit smaller, right? A little bit smaller sphere of influence. So we attack the issue in both directions, right? We need that big overarching guidance where we want to go, right? And then we need the little baby steps to get there, right? So we're breaking apart that boulder into manageable rocks, right? Manageable things. So building off of what Julia said, in creating safe spaces, right? If one way to create a safe space is when we have those, we're now going to try to label a difficult conversation as a courageous conversation, right? And try to spin it in a positive light, which is difficult in itself. But to have a safe space for those courageous conversations, we like to suggest ground rules, right? And ground rules for any meeting of that type of sort. So we do have in the toolkit some ideas on how to set up ground rules. The big one is make sure that whoever is there gets to take part in establishing them, right? So they get buy-in for what's safe and what may not be, right? Because that's now how everyone is heard. And then in individual conversations, or in ways that we treat each other, we tend to go by the adage of, well, I want to treat you how I want to be treated, right? And there's nothing wrong with that in essence, but how I want to be treated may not be how you want to be treated, right? So why don't we just ask, how do you want to be treated, right? And that goes a long way. We're not going to get it right all the time, so we need to give ourselves some grace, and but in us giving ourselves some grace and trying to make an honest effort to be inclusive, to be warm, to be accepting of others, then we tend to get that grace back, right? So when we do kind of stumble along the way and not get it quite right, that's okay. We're forgiving and we can move on together.
I love that. It brings me back to when you were talking, Julia, about open and honest conversations, and Melissa, you're talking about that grace and to just create a space for people to be able to communicate and share what they know and what they don't know. And I I say this a lot in spaces when we're having conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I share that on a personal level, I hope I never arrive. I don't, I don't think that there is, humbly I say that, even, on my last days, I don't think that I will fully understand, the scope of this work and individual experiences, because that is not my experience. The personal narratives, the voices of others, thinking about marginalized, minoritized communities in particular, like that's my path. My walk is very different, right? But I embrace not cultural competency, but humility, and lean on others, and really respect the voices of those with lived experiences as it relates to who they are and who they represent. And I think by listening and being open to what people have to share, honoring and validating those experiences, even within AAUW, when it doesn't feel good to hear, hey, I didn't feel invited, I didn't feel welcomed, and I didn't feel supported. Those are things that, I think that they're very difficult, but those are individual experiences that we can't discount, because they were folks that were coming into our spaces, and for whatever reason, that was what they felt. And it very much so ties to this conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this other piece around arrival and how we won't, figure it all out, and probably should not, as things evolve. There's other considerations and intersectional elements that we have to consider. And there's this piece around, let's just be honest, we're talking about oppressive forces. Whether we're talking about racism, ableism, sexism, they're all the isms, all the oppressive acts that have occurred that are really rooted in, our systems of, within our communities, organizations, higher education, a place where, I exist, academia. We need to acknowledge, that much of this is rooted in white supremacy and capitalism, and it can, and great harm has occurred for hundreds and hundreds of years. You can't undo that easily, and you can't undo that history. And so space, and there's a lot of it. So how can you learn all of that, right? So there's just an offering there to, again, when we tie it back to accountability, this piece around, whether that's consultants, whether that's readings, recommendations, to continue to dive into it to the extent in which you can, that really can be a supportive act, and know that there's always grace and space for you to learn, and that's welcomed, and we use these spaces to open up that conversation too. All righty.
If I could pick up on just one of the excellent points that you just made, and that was the question of how can we learn all of this? And I think the key is that we don't have to learn all of it. It's I think a question of being open to learning new things and learning more, and to allow ourselves the space to be exposed to things that are different from what we have perhaps been accustomed to. And I think one of the more exciting things about DEI is the fact that it's a lifelong learning opportunity. It's not like you've got to read so many books between now and Christmas, or you've got to learn so many acronyms or this many terms and phrases. It's letting your mind be open and expanded to the opportunity and the possibility of learning more.
So much gratitude for that. Thank you, thank you. Next question is, And we've touched a little bit on this as well. But what are the creative ways we can expand our knowledge around issues of diversity, equity, inclusion as members?
So I think that we need to think about people's comfort levels, right? And I'm touching on that because I see a question in the chat or in the Q&A about how do we incorporate more of the hybrid, right? Meeting both in person and online, right? There are some great seminars or collaborative events that you can do online to help expand your capabilities, right, or your knowledge base. Like they're actually great for people that are really interested and have the time and the money. There are whole online like DEI, DEIB, and pick a combination of the letters that interest you, right? The certifications that you can do to expand your knowledge base. But there's also things like just go to a cultural event. Like, what month is it right now? It's Women's History Month, right? Let's go celebrate ourselves somewhere in some fun event. And this is where that collaborative environment and getting people and groups with the same mission together to start those types of events and just start talking. If you want to do something a little more low key, we do have in the toolkit ideas for books to do like book clubs to help expand your knowledge that way. Or at least expand a discussion, right? Because we all have different sets of knowledge to share with each other, just among our own teams. So if you're not necessarily comfortable going outside of that, and I'm seeing another question about how do we get people outside of our own circle? Well, maybe a book club is it. Maybe a lunch is it. And I heard Stormy and your team talking before about having good attendance for your lunches, your fun lunches, which is great. Maybe that's one way to do it, right? I see now all of the time, I think I saw like 4 advertisements today alone for various like wine and paint things, right? Or beer and paint things, or pick your beverage like water and paint, right? But you're just talking and you're having fun and you're sharing experiences. So not everything has to be like super heavy all of the time. This is a serious topic and I don't want to take away from that. But I think that we are more willing to have those real, honest, heavy conversations when we just know each other as people first. Right. So let's know each other as people and expand on our knowledge of people. And then we can really go into the things that drive us and that brought us all together. So I hope that wasn't too far off the original question.
No, I think that's great. I think was it the night before last, and this was tied to my work. I attended a Dia de los Muertos event that was put on by Puente, which is one of our learning communities, and then our mental health department and one of our ethnic studies faculty. And it was just, they started off with a presentation just speaking to the purpose behind the event. And it was just so enriching, culturally understanding, just the meaning behind it, joy and sorrow and like lifting up ancestors. And I just left with it. And I saw similarities even, within, just my cultural background and how we, connect with ancestors. And so there was commonality there, but there was greater appreciation within that cultural community around this event, but also feeling like, I could be a part of that. There was an invitation to be a part of that. So just in that moment, that was an opportunity to expand my learning and understanding. And I think I'll forever more remember this time in relation to Day of the Dead. So anyways, that's what popped up for me when you were speaking to that. So there's and I know this has been touched on as well. There's this this has come up with the DEI committee. I'm seeing it pop up in this question. I actually very much so am aligned with this feeling around, we have the acronyms, but thinking about access and how it's embedded in the work that we're doing, particularly as we, think about even the spaces, being able to convene in this way. Melissa, I don't know if we would have been able to easily, just, be able to come together in, a month and a half and create this space. But it's definitely, the hybrid element, online element has created a greater accessibility in terms of, being able to come together, greater flexibility. I think about, the subtitles that are embedded and the technology that's used to make that accessible. And I think that there's lots more that we need to do around this. And I acknowledge that these spaces aren't accessible for all, right? So, but I think that that's a piece of, again, expanding. We have the acronyms, but there's opportunity to really flex beyond just the acronyms alone and tie those elements to this our broader mission and work. Okay, so there's there's question, how can we limit or avoid behavior that may unintentionally exclude or limit a desire to engage in AAUW? And I think about that subtle acts of inclusion, but what are those subtle acts of that are kind of actually exclusionary in nature? And I think that this ties back to the point I wanted to make around that, related to a question that popped up around microaggressions and even thinking about unconscious bias. And so I think there's opportunity to tie and speak to some of those elements related to this question. And I'll repeat that again because I started rambling. How can we limit or avoid behavior that may unintentionally exclude or limit a desire to engage in AAUW?
I think that you hit a big one in terms of we don't know our unconscious bias until we've turned someone off, right? We don't know that we committed a microaggression until we turn someone off. So having those honest conversations and then doing some deep reflection of ourselves, right? You may not have to have a conversation with me for me to pick up on, I did something that didn't sit right with you in a conversation, right? This is now our emotional intelligence. Did your body language change at some point in our conversation, right? And could I pick up on that trigger, right? And I'm not saying to be overly sensitive, even though studies do show that the higher the emotional intelligence a person is, the more sensitive that person is, right? And it could turn into everything is about me. Like, I am doing everything to turn this person off, as opposed to this person had a bad day and is probably coming down with the flu, right? That has nothing to do with you. But you're at least picking up on something, right? So that was a long rambling answer to say, let's do some self-reflection to figure out where we are and how we may be rubbing people the wrong way unintentionally. And let's create those safe spaces to bring up if a microaggression occurred, if there is some unconscious bias that has occurred. Because I think I hope that we all know if something is egregious, that it was egregious, right? One step further, I hope we don't do the egregious thing, but at least we know if we did. Right? So it's the little things that we don't know about that are ingrained, that we have to undo just based on our prior knowledge, and things that were acceptable in one place aren't acceptable now, and that's okay.
I agree with that, Melissa, but I think I would add that not all of us are self-sentient enough to know when we have offended someone. A lot of that depends on how each of us was socialized and the environment and conditions that we both grew up in and currently live in. One of the questions in the Q&A, which is a really tough question, is what if you're in a branch where all the members are white senior citizens who feel their post-retirement lives are complete and satisfying, and who have basically no interest in doing the kind of outreach and mind expanding kind of diversity that we're talking about. And then the other really hard question in the Q&A is, how do you plan to hold us accountable? This whole exercise is not about compliance. It's not about giving you as individual members and branches and state affiliates a grade or a ding if you do this or you don't do that. I would say the question of accountability is really going to be self-accountability within your branch. If you have a branch, change is hard. Even when we recognize that there is a need to make change, and when we genuinely want to change, it's still hard because it is different from what we have been doing. For some of us, it's a lifetime of different from what we have been doing. And there are so many reasons why people resist change. And I'm not going to say that resisting change is good or bad. It is all situational and it's relative. But what we do know is that as an organization, if we do not change and adapt to programs, initiatives, activities, policies, procedures, and actions in a way that is relevant to the audience that we are seeking to engage, that we're not going to be successful. If we continue to try to do things the way they have always been done for the last 100 years, we're not going to be successful as an organization. And more importantly, if we refuse to open our minds to learn more things and to be welcoming and diverse as an organization, then we're going to die as an organization. Some branches are already facing the situation where they're having to disband because they have 30 or fewer members and all of them are 75 or older. They don't necessarily drive anymore. They don't necessarily drive at night anymore. All membership associations and organizations across the country are facing the same dilemma of not diversifying their membership. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to engage younger women to join membership organizations and associations, because in very large measure, women who are under 40 just don't have the time, the inclination, or the desire to spend the little bit of free time they have while they're trying to develop their careers, while they have young children and they are starting their families, or they're in other organizations that are doing things that are personally meaningful and satisfying to them. And they don't want to spend the little bit of spare time or free time they have in a meeting with people who don't look like them, who don't think like them, who are not welcoming to them when they come to the meeting. And they spend 2 hours in a business meeting arguing about Robert's Rules of Order and whether a motion was in order. And I say that as a member of the National Association of Parliamentarians and somebody who loves bylaws and rules of order. But I recognize that I'm in a minority, that most people do not like those things and don't want to spend their time haggling about them. And so maybe we need to be thinking about the order of business of our meetings and how we are conducting meetings and whether we are doing things that are engaging and interesting and inviting, even to older members, not just younger potential members. But, and I hope what I'm saying isn't offensive to anybody. I don't mean for it to be offensive, but evolution has taught us that organisms that cannot change and adapt do not survive the passage of time. And that's true of organizations as well. And so I think we have to really ask those branch members, if you're in a branch where it seems like nobody wants to change, nobody wants to invite anybody new in, they only want to be in a closed bubble and only engaged and interchanging and interacting with one another are people who look like them and who think like them and who act like them. At the national level, we're not going to try to force you as a branch to participate in DEI. We're not going to try to force you to change. If you are not able to recognize that there is a need to do so, and you remain the way you have always been, time and attrition will take care of that, unfortunately.
You said a lot. Thank you for that. Really appreciate that. And I was just thinking about our business meetings and the way that we conduct them. And, I think asking that question of, is it mission centered? Does it advance our work? Those are really drivers in our conversations. And you're right. If we get caught up in things that, may appear to be important in the details and those elements, but it takes space and it takes time, and it may take us away from the critical conversations, the crucial conversations we need to have as it relates to this work and our efforts.
And I would say one other thing. Not only is change difficult, not only is it hard, change doesn't come quickly. And we are the topic that we are talking about, the corner, if you will, that as a society, as a country, that we have painted ourselves into by not being inclusive and welcoming and open to learning different things and about different cultures, and learning to appreciate the things about those who are different and diverse from us. That didn't happen in the space of a year or so. It took decades and decades and decades and decades for us to get to the point where we are now. And hopefully it will not take us that long to move from that space to one that is more desirable for most, and I hope all of us. But just like a good marriage or a good relationship, it takes constantly working on it and being willing to listen to your partner. In this case, being willing to listen to others in your branch, in your state affiliate, in the organization, being willing to listen to new people that you meet. You're not going to agree on everything, and perhaps they will learn something from you, and hopefully you will learn something from them. But it has to be a give and take.
Absolutely. So we have a little less than 20 minutes left. And, and we've definitely addressed the questions that were put forth, but want to, just want to spend some time. Melissa, I know you have some information to share with us and highlight as it relates to resources and national efforts. And there's lots going on. It occurred in September, about to occur this weekend and moving forward. And so I'd like to just, before we answer any other questions that might pop up in the Q&A, just we can bring up those slides and give you a few minutes to be able to speak to some of the national resources available. We've referenced them, but just a deeper dive.
So thanks so this is really just a kind of recap of what we do as your national committee, what we are here for, and really what we are here for is to help you. Okay, so we have a few things in our charter, and one of which, the main one, is to create and maintain that diversity toolkit. And I'm seeing things in the chat about, what terms do we use when people aren't comfortable using DEI terms, or they're tired of using DEI terms. And we do focus a lot on terminology in the toolkit, but that's just so we create common understanding. But we do give some ideas on just how to talk to people without necessarily creating or forcing a definition. So I can give you the Melissa answer on what I do when people are tired of terminology, and when they're tired of DEI. And I like to say that I Miyagi them, right? For those of you that have done the Karate Kid, right, or seen Karate Kid, right? You talk about it without talking about it, and it goes back to empathy and treating people how they want to be treated. And then these concepts just kind of slip in there, right? But in the toolkit, coming back to our responsibilities, in the toolkit, we do give you ideas on how to at least foster conversation in an educational way that both creates common understanding and a common safe space. And we do actually partner with or collaborate with some of the other committees at the national level. For instance, we're working with the Advancement Committee fairly closely because a lot of advancement issues are also inclusion issues, right? So we want to make sure that we're sending common messaging and giving you common tools and ideas to address the issues that you all are seeing and bringing up to us. Next slide, please. Again, we also support affiliates, and when we say affiliates, we mean you, right? So in my my humble opinion, my committee is here to support you with tools and resources to do the things that you want to do. It does say here that we recommend metrics for diversity, inclusion, and intersectionality. That, again, that's not are you meeting goals or are you not meeting goals? We're not in that compliance, like Julia said. That's not what we do. What we do is we want to make sure that you, if you have a goal, we help you meet your goal. But that's as far as we go. We're not saying in any way, shape, or form, you know, someone's not viable or someone's not meeting national standards. We don't have that. We are just a helping organization. Okay. Next slide, please. We do review our own effectiveness as a national committee, and our effectiveness is how effectively we are helping you. So we love feedback. And if you don't have it, we have at the end of this slideshow the email address for our DEI committee, right? And Shannon sees this, and we all see this, right? And we love feedback, good and not so good, right? Because again, the not so good gives us those areas to improve to better help you in what you want to do. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So here's my committee. We are small, but we are mighty. And in April-May timeframe, you may see a notice to apply for the committee. And we love new members, especially folks with your expertise. Because a lot of what we're doing now is coming from folks on my team who are branch and state diversity officers. So they are directly tied to what people need in the field. So super excited to have our team, but I also, and if you come to any of our trainings or our webinars, you'll see these amazing people who are giving their expertise and sharing their knowledge with everyone. I also bring that up to say we're a small team, but we're a mighty team, right? So if we're not addressing a need that you have right now, it may not be because we don't want to address it, maybe because there's a need that was previously identified, right? So we're working things in the queues when we can. Okay, with that, next slide, please. Okay, for this year, we have 4 goals. The first of which is just to increase the sharing of resources among our diversity officers. And then to draft, and our second goal is to draft and execute diversity officer training. So we're shifting gears. Last year, our main goals were to establish and publicize that toolkit, really get it up and running. And now that it is, and part of that toolkit was creating webinars and hosting webinars and doing plug and play programming, which is like lesson plans that you all can use in the field to start with these courageous conversations and to establish ground rules and have ideas on how to baseline your organization in terms of where you are for inclusion. Right. So we gave you those tools. That was last year's goals. Now that we have this baseline, we want to focus on you and give you the expertise and ideas on how to use what's in the toolkit, and then create more items, which is goal 4, develop and present 2 additional plug and play programs, lesson plans, and associated webinars for your use. So our webinar that will happen on 1 December at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, is a deeper dive into having these hard conversations. So we're going to talk quite a bit about microaggressions and some unconscious bias and looking at reflecting at some self-reflection. So we hope that you can join us. You'll see a link to sign up for that webinar in a couple weeks. So be on the lookout for that. And then we'll have an associated lesson plan to go along with that you can use in your branches. And then our third goal, I know I jumped around, so thanks for bearing with me, but our third goal is really to to strengthen the collaboration between the advancement committees specifically in our committee, because we have a lot of overlap in terms of our goals and the needs that we're hearing. So next slide, please. All right, goal 1. We have diversity officer meetings the third Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. If you were not on that distro list to get those notifications for meetings or resources, we do send out resources or share resources among the diversity officers. Please let me know. We absolutely want to add you and have you part of that conversation. In those meetings, we do go over best practices. So we ask that if you have something you're really proud of, to share it with everyone else so we can learn. And also, if you have something that you're not so proud of, something you're really struggling with, we talk about it there too, because your struggle is probably the struggle of some other branch. So we want to hear that from you too. And we treat these meetings as working groups that we host every month. And then we worked really closely with the communications team at AAUW to create a space within the DEI toolkit to post these resources. And it is live, so it has gone live since I've sent these slides, yay. And I think we have the links later on, but there is a place in the toolkit for diversity officer resources. And right now what we have in there are the 2 links for the past diversity officer trainings. So that site is going to be where we share resources among all the diversity officers for your use, because we realize you're doing a lot of really good things. So we also want you all to share resources amongst each other, and just post on the site. Okay, next slide. All right. So goal 2 is to draft and execute diversity officer training. I can say that we have successfully done 1 set. So the first set that occurred in September focused on just what diversity officers do and why you are important, because you're so vital to this organization. So as I said, the links to those recordings, they are posted now, and we can make sure that link goes out. We hosted 1 training for the second set of diversity officers trainings. So we had one on the 29th that was geared mostly towards Eastern time zone, but everyone was welcome, just like the one that we are going to host on this coming Saturday is geared mostly for you all out here, so you're not waking up really early, but everyone is welcome to attend. So the topics that we are going to include this time are some of the things that we covered tonight, like emotional intelligence, creating inclusive experiences, recruiting diverse members, and collaborating with culturally based initiatives. So our goal is to start the conversation and give you all some resources. If you have not seen the link to sign up for that session, let us know, but we can also send that out. We'll make sure Stormy has it if she doesn't already. Next slide, please. So goal 3, work closely with the advancement committee. So right now, I'm working closely with the advancement committee chair. Dale is a fantastic human being who has so much energy. It's great working with her. So we attend each other's meetings and just collaborate to see those opportunities for collaboration. So we're taking lessons learned from each other and sharing them for these tasks and issues. But we also acknowledge that we are looking for ideas to include more information, specifically written information that we can publicize to all of you, right? And give you all some hints or blurbs that you can use in your own newsletters that come from both of us about topics that you care about. So if you have any ideas for things that you want us to provide some information or guidance or suggestions for, again, send them our way. Dale and I would love to hear from those, or from you on those. And next slide. So goal 4. We are going to develop and present 2 additional plug and plays. I think I typoed this, and that's my fault. So 1 December is it is the Thursday. So Thursday at 2 p.m., first Thursday of the month. And it is going to be a deeper dive into courageous conversations. And then the next webinar is going to be in spring. So figure on probably April. We will publicize that date and time later on, but we want to hear your ideas because again, these webinars and the associated lesson plans for it are based on things that we know you need in the field, and we know you need them because you've told us, right? So these are geared, while it's for the bigger AAUW audience, they are for you. Okay, next slide. Okay, open Q&A. Tell us how we're doing, right? How can we supplement or support your goals? And what could we be doing for you that we're not? We love feedback. Please send us all of the feedback, to include Melissa is horrible at dates and times. So thank you for that catch on the last one. We'll make sure to send out that I actually do have a proofreader I did not use for this, and you can clearly tell. So I will make sure to use Mark Hamill. He's actually, he was a California member, right? And he's on the national committee, and he's fantastic. I know he was sad to leave all of you, and hopefully you feel the same way, but he is my, hey, Melissa, you got this wrong written guy. So I'm going to use him more often. Anyway.
We all need those people, right? Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Lots of good things that are popping up and resources for us to, regardless of our role, to expand our knowledge and understanding around diversity, equity, inclusion, and a place to be able to provide feedback. So, and possibly for those that are interested, April, May, I think you said, around the National Inclusion and Equity Committee. So, okay, thank you. So with that, I want to, so we have, and if you've been in other spaces with me, I try to hold as much as I can to the time that we've provided, but I do think that it's important to allow maybe 1 or 2 individuals, attendees who would like to speak to, just make any kind of comments around the good work that you're doing within your branch to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. It could be an event, it could have been a publication, but you'd have 1 minute to speak to this. And what you would do is just use the raise hand feature. I will likely not be able to call on everyone, but I will select 1 or 2 names at first glance, and then we'll allow you to speak. We'll unmute you.
Raise hand feature has been activated.
Thank you. And Linda, do you want to share what the raise hand feature is for everyone?
So yes, if you click on reactions, the little caret on reactions, then you should see, you click on the reactions, you should see the raise hand feature. You can go ahead and raise your hand. 1 person has raised her hand.
Great. So I will go ahead and call on Denise.
Yes, thank you. I'm from OML branch in California, and we have been having a DEI committee for 2 years. There are some people who think there's too much focus on it, and et cetera, but we have an active 20 members, which is about almost 5%. 20% of our members who attend. And we've been reading books and educating ourselves and working in the community. And the people who are not attending, many have told me that they are reading the books along with us, and they are like hearing about it, but they don't want to talk about it. And then the other thing we did recently is that we had our the chief assistant public defender speak to our branch, and the public defender's office all over the state and all over the country, they've basically changed, and they're changing how they manage public defense to deal with social justice issues and to better work to better support their clients. And they want to talk about it. They want to get that word out, and they're willing to speak to organizations. So they were very pleased that we asked them. And so there are people who want to talk about it and who will come out and talk to your group. So I encourage people to ask.
Thank you, Denise, for sharing and for that resource as well. I think that's a great recommendation. I will now call on Lata.
Thank you. So I am a DEI educator outside of AAUW, and I've actually started speaking to some branches as a speaker, and I'm quite willing and not always available, but I could find availability if asked. It's what I do, and I'm happy to do it for AAUW because I have ideas for, and we have work to do, as we all discussed in this meeting. So I will be speaking to my own branch in Santa Maria in January. Before that, I was asked to speak at the kickoff meeting for the Atascadero branch. This is all on the central coast of California. I spoke to the Atascadero branch in September. Sadly, got no questions in the Q&A. However, I did get some follow-up from individuals who said they were going to try to implement my suggestions. So that was heartening. And it will take time, of course, as we said here. But I hope they're taking the first steps, and that makes all the difference. Also, I'm really grateful for the last DEI training that I believe you led, Melissa, couple of months ago, because I have now been implementing things that people have mentioned in that meeting. And in fact, someone from there has connected with me on email from Wisconsin, and I'll be speaking to her group virtually, probably in January or February. But beyond that, I got suggestions like having one of the monthly newsletter topics or writing for the newsletter on these issues. I already write the President's Corner as co-president of my branch every month. So I'm having every month now focus on one aspect of that acronym I had mentioned earlier in the questions pane, JABBED, what I like to use, JABBED for justice, accessibility, belonging, equity, inclusion, and diversity. So every month I'm focusing on one of those. And I'm going to lead one of the book discussion groups for one of our book groups on Michelle Obama's Belonging. And I'm going to do that early next year. So this is great, but I am one person and the youngest active member of color in my branch. And my hope, my next challenge will be that I'm not always doing this work and that other branch members will take it on. So that's the next step. Thank you.
Thank you for everything that you're doing and for extending that offering. And we do, from time to time, get inquiries around, do we know individuals that might be willing to speak to branches? So not to overtask you, but maybe we'll call upon you, and then you can decide whether or not you have space and capacity to lend some support. If it's okay, there's just one other hand, and it just doesn't seem right to not allow Jane to be able to speak. And so Jane, I'm going to allow you to talk in 1 minute for membership kudos, and then I'll go ahead and close this out.
Was this me, Jane Drinkwalter?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, sorry,
That's it.
I did it by accident. I was actually trying to copy the last note from Julia Brown, which I really liked your last point, and it will not cut and paste copy in the Q&A or the chat. Maybe please add that sometime in remarks. I liked that.
I think we might be able, our team might be able to help with that and make sure that we provide that information. So yeah, we can work on that if you're having difficulty so that you have access to that information.
Thank you.
Over
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to let everyone know the Q&A and the chat will be available to print out after the meeting. It will be online in the webinar section.
Thank you. Okay, so just to go ahead and close this out, again, extending our gratitude to Melissa and Julia for your time, this hour and a half and some change to be able to speak to us, just really like heartfelt and open and transparent, and we appreciate that. That's the nature of these conversations, how they should be. And so thank you for your willingness to be here with us in community. And I hope it's not the last conversation. Certainly we'll be seeing you in other spaces, obviously. So thank you for everything that you've done tonight and everything that you do for AAUW. We appreciate you. And with that, I want to thank everyone who stayed and stayed a little bit longer. I want you to know that immediately following this, you will get an email with a DEI Statewide Chat feedback form. It's very quick. Well, it could be longer depending on how long it takes you to answer that first question, but we really just want to hear, what do you want to hear in terms of our future DEI statewide chats? We have 3 more coming up, and so next one would be in February, and we'd like your comments to inform that conversation. And as always, you can reach the DEI committee at diversity@aauwcalifornia.org. So be on the lookout for that feedback form, check your emails, and we look forward to seeing you in the peer group spaces and future chats. And thank you for all that you're doing and for being a part of this community and conversation. And we'll go ahead and end there. Have a wonderful evening. If you've not had dinner, go do that. Nourishment is important. And we'll see you soon.